The firing range fell silent. Commander Vex'thal of the Galactic Defense Academy stood with his 4 arms crossed, watching the human female load her weapon. Around him, 24 cadets from 6 different species shifted nervously, their training rifles held at rest position. The air smelled of ozone and recycled atmosphere, typical for a standard combat assessment day. Except today wasn't standard. Today, they had a human. Instructor? Cadet Morpheus, a Kryllion with scales that shimmered blue under the facility lights, raised one clawed hand. Is it true what they say about human reaction speed? Vex'thal's mandibles clicked in what his students recognized as amusement. You mean the rumors that they are slow, clumsy, limited by their primitive neural pathways? Yes, sir. Absolutely true. Vex'thal gestured toward the human with his lower left arm. Observe Cadet Reyna Cortez, human, from a planet that only achieved interstellar flight 2 generations ago. Her species possesses single-chamber hearts, vulnerable external skeletal structures, and reaction times that rank, according to our databases, in the lower 40th percentile among registered sapient species. Reyna didn't look up from checking her rifle's power cell. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation braid, and she wore the same gray training uniform as every other cadet. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. Vex'thal continued, warming to his lecture. Humans cannot see in ultraviolet. They cannot hear subsonic frequencies. Their olfactory senses are laughable compared to a Fenrisian tracker. By every measurable metric, they are average at best, inferior at worst. Then why is she here? This from Cadet Thren, a 6-legged arachnoid whose species boasted reflexes fast enough to snatch insects from the air. Good question. Vex'thal had asked his superiors the same thing when Reyna's assignment came through. The Academy rarely accepted humans, not out of prejudice exactly, just practicality. Why waste resources training soldiers who would never match the physical capabilities of species that had evolved for combat? But the High Council had insisted. Something about political integration and giving Earth's newest generation a chance to prove themselves among the stars. Vex'thal suspected it was really about optics. Show the humans some kindness, let them fail gracefully, send them home with participation certificates. She is here, Vex'thal said slowly, because the Council believes in giving every species an opportunity. Now, today's exercise is simple. The targeting system will project hostile enemies at random intervals. You will engage and neutralize them. Speed and accuracy both factor into your final score. The current Academy record is held by Cadet Morpheus at 4.2 seconds for 10 targets. Very impressive for a species with naturally enhanced reflexes. Morpheus preened slightly, his scales brightening. Cadet Cortez. Vex'thal turned his full attention to Reyna. You will go last. Watch carefully. Learn what you can. Nobody expects you to compete with the others. Simply do your best. Finally, Reyna looked up. Her brown eyes met his, and for just a moment, Vex'thal felt something odd. Not defiance, not anger. Something else. Something that made his secondary nervous system tingle in a way he didn't quite understand. Understood, Commander, she said quietly. The first cadet stepped into the range booth. The exercise began. One by one, students entered the training scenario. Holographic enemies materialized at random angles, distances, elevations. Some appeared as hostile soldiers, others as combat drones or predatory creatures from a dozen different worlds. The cadets responded with varying degrees of success. Morpheus performed flawlessly, his enhanced Kryllian reflexes, allowing him to spin and fire almost before the targets fully materialized. 4.1 seconds. A new personal record. Thren the arachnoid managed 4.8 seconds, her multiple eyes tracking threats in all directions simultaneously. Even Cadet Blink, a methane-breathing Vortian who had to wear an environmental suit, clocked in at 5.3 seconds. Then came Reyna's turn. She stepped into the booth without ceremony, set her stance, squared, balanced, brought the rifle up to a ready position that looked awkward compared to species with more flexible joint structures. Her breathing slowed. Vex'thal noted that with mild interest. Most species breathed faster before combat. Adrenaline response. Natural fear. Humans apparently did the opposite. "Begin when ready, Cadet," Vex'thal announced through the comm system. Reyna blinked once, slowly, then, ready. The simulation activated. The first target appeared 3 meters ahead, center mass. Standard engagement. Reyna's rifle cracked once, the hologram dissolved. Second target, left flank, elevated position. Another shot. Gone. Third target behind cover, only partial exposure. Reyna adjusted, fired, hit. Vex'thal's mandibles stopped clicking. His 4 eyes narrowed, refocusing. Around him, the other cadets leaned forward. Because Reyna wasn't just hitting targets. She was doing something none of them had seen before. She was shooting at empty air. Fourth target materialized exactly where her rifle was already aimed. She fired the instant it appeared, maybe before. The timing was impossible to judge. Fifth target, sixth, seventh. Each time, Reyna's rifle tracked to a new position and fired just as the hologram completed its rendering process. The discharge sound and the target materialization sound overlapped, becoming almost a single event. "What is she doing?" Morpheus whispered. Vex'thal didn't answer. Couldn't answer. His combat experience spanned 4 decades and 17 campaigns. He knew every trick, every technique, every tactical approach to close-quarters battle. This wasn't any of them. Reyna moved with a strange economy of motion, her body compact, controlled. Where other cadets pivoted their entire stance to acquire new targets, she seemed to flow, her weapon leading, her feet barely shifting. Her breathing remained slow, steady. Target 8 appeared behind her. She was already turning, had been turning before it spawned, and her shot punched through the hologram's center mass while she was still in motion. 9, 10, silence. The range's automated timer displayed the final result in glowing numbers above the booth. 2.8 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 2.8 seconds. Nearly a full second and a half faster than the previous Academy record. Faster than cadets with 4 eyes. Faster than species engineered for combat. Faster than anyone had ever scored in the 90-year history of the Galactic Defense Academy. Achieved by a human. A species that supposedly ranked in the lower 40th percentile for reflexes. Vex'thal walked slowly toward the booth, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Reyna had already safed her weapon and was standing at ease, her expression neutral. Not smug, not proud, just waiting. "Cadet Cortez," Vex'thal said carefully. "Explain your methodology." "Sir?" "You were firing at positions before targets appeared. That should be impossible. The simulation uses true randomization protocols. There is no pattern to predict, no algorithm to exploit. So explain how you achieved a score that exceeds the physical capabilities of your species." Reyna tilted her head slightly. "I wasn't predicting where they would appear, Commander." "Then what were you doing?" "I was predicting where I would put them. If I wanted to kill me. Vex'thal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of confusion in his species. Clarify. The simulation is designed to test combat response, right? To create realistic threat scenarios? Reyna spoke slowly, as if explaining something obvious. So I assumed the system would position targets in tactically advantageous locations. Cover points, elevation, blind spots, places where a real enemy would set up to maximize their chances of success. That is correct, yes, but so I stopped reacting to where targets were appearing and started thinking about where they should appear. Where I would appear if I wanted the best shot at someone in this booth. Then I just aimed at those positions and waited. She said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, as if she hadn't just invalidated decades of training doctrine with a simple perspective shift. You turned a reaction drill into a prediction exercise, Vex'thal said slowly. I mean, pure reaction speed is always going to lose to preparation. You can't outquick a bullet that's already coming, but you can shoot first if you know where the bullet's coming from. Morpheus spoke up from the observation area, his voice tight. But you can't know. It's random. Reyna turned to look at him, and something in her expression made Vex'thal's secondary nervous system tingle again. It's not random. Not really. Random would mean targets appearing inside walls or overlapping each other or in positions where they have no tactical value. The simulation creates realistic combat scenarios. Realistic means predictable, at least to someone who understands how ambushes work. And you understand ambushes? Vex'thal asked. My family's been at war for 3,000 years, Commander. We've gotten pretty good at understanding how people try to kill us. 3,000 years. Vex'thal knew human history, knew about their endless cycles of conflict, their species' apparent inability to stop fighting itself long enough to focus on exploration or advancement. Where other species had unified under single governments centuries before achieving spaceflight, humans had come to the stars still divided into hundreds of competitive nations. Most species considered it primitive, barbaric, a sign of evolutionary failure. Vex'thal was suddenly reconsidering that assessment. Run it again, he said quietly. Reyna nodded, reloaded her rifle, and stepped back into position. The simulation began. 2.6 seconds. Again, 2.9 seconds. Again, 2.7 seconds. By the fifth run, Vex'thal had activated his personal data recorder and was reviewing the footage frame by frame. What he saw made his primary heart rate accelerate uncomfortably. Reyna was reading the environment, not the targets themselves, but the space around them. Every surface, every angle, every potential firing position. Her eyes tracked in patterns that seemed random until you mapped them against tactical doctrine. She was conducting a threat assessment not of what existed, but of what could exist. And then she was making it happen, forcing the simulation's randomization to work against itself by preparing for every likely outcome simultaneously. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was the most human thing Vex'thal had ever witnessed. Cadet Cortez, he said after the sixth run, stand down. Reyna stepped out of the booth, her breathing still controlled, still slow. Not even winded. Meanwhile, Morpheus looked like he'd witnessed a religious event, his scales cycling through colors Vex'thal had never seen before. Vex'thal's comm unit chirped. Incoming message from the Academy's Tactical Assessment Division. Marked urgent. He opened it with one claw while keeping his primary eyes on Reyna. The message was brief. Commander Vex'thal, explain the anomalous scores being reported from Range 7. Our systems indicate An error. Not an error, a revelation. "Cadets," Vex'thal announced, his voice carrying across the range. "Class dismissed. All except Cadet Cortez. You will remain for additional assessment." The others filed out slowly, casting glances back at Reyna. Morpheus lingered at the door until Vex'thal gestured him away with a sharp mandible click. When they were alone, Vex'thal deactivated the range's recording systems. Not regulation, but necessary for what he needed to say. "Cadet Cortez, do you understand what you have just done? Beaten the range record?" She said it without arrogance. Pure statement of fact. "You have invalidated the Academy's primary metric for combat assessment. You have demonstrated that our understanding of human capabilities is fundamentally flawed, and you have done so in front of witnesses from 6 different species who will spread word of this throughout the Academy by end of day." Reyna's expression didn't change. "Is that a problem, Commander?" "Was it?" Vex'thal considered. The Academy existed to train the galaxy's finest soldiers, to prepare cadets for the reality of combat across 1,000 different environments against threats known and unknown. For 90 years, they had relied on physical metrics: speed, strength, sensory acuity. What if they'd been measuring the wrong things? "How many other humans can do what you just did?" Vex'thal asked. Reyna shrugged, a gesture that looked odd on a species with such limited shoulder flexibility. "Most of them? I mean, any decent infantry soldier learns predictive targeting in basic training. My dad could probably run this course in under 2 seconds. He's got 30 years of combat experience." 30 years. This young female had learned these techniques from her father, who had learned them from someone else, passed down through generations of humans who spent their entire evolutionary history trying to kill each other more efficiently. Vex'thal felt something he rarely experienced: excitement. "Cadet Cortez, tomorrow you will report to my office at 0600 hours. Bring your training scores from Earth's military academy. Bring any documentation regarding your family's combat experience. Bring everything." "Why, sir?" Vex'thal's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Krellian equivalent of a smile. "Because I am going to recommend a complete overhaul of the Academy's combat training program, and you are going to help me build it." Reyna's neutral expression finally cracked, just slightly. One corner of her mouth turned upward. "You want to teach aliens how to fight like humans? I want to teach soldiers how to win. Your species may be slow by our standards, weak by our measurements, limited by our metrics, but you have spent 3,000 years learning something that the rest of the galaxy never needed to master, because we stopped fighting each other so early in our development." "What's that?" "How to be predators." The word hung in the recycled air of the range. Reyna held his gaze, and Vex'thal saw recognition there. Understanding. "My dad's going to laugh when I tell him this story," she said quietly. "Because humans always said we'd make terrible citizens of a peaceful galaxy." Her slight smile widened just a fraction. "Guess we were right." Vex'thal's comm chirped again. More urgent messages from Tactical Assessment Division, from the Rangemaster, from the Academy Commandant herself. He ignored them all. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Academy would have to face an uncomfortable truth: that the primitive humans they'd reluctantly accepted as students had skills the rest of the galaxy had forgotten even existed. Skills honed through millennia of conflict that had seemed wasteful and barbaric. Until now. Until someone needed to teach soldiers not just how to react faster, but how to think deadlier. "Dismissed, Cadet," Vex'thal said. And Cortez? Sir. Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy. Something tells me you are going to do very well here. Reyna saluted, crisp and precise, then turned and walked toward the exit. Vex'thal watched her go, already composing his report to the commandant in his head. The firing range fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Charged. Electric. Like the moment before a storm breaks, or before a revolution begins. Vex'thal looked at the score display still glowing above the booth. 2.8 seconds. A human record. An Academy record. A record that would stand as the moment everything changed. He clicked his mandibles in satisfaction and went to make some very uncomfortable calls to very important people. This was going to be interesting. The Academy Commandant's office occupied the highest level of the central spire, a tower that stretched 300 meters above the training complex. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of 6 different biospheres where cadets trained in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to liquid methane swamps. Commandant Kira Thos sat behind a desk carved from compressed meteor stone, her 4 eyes fixed on Vex'thal with an expression he'd seen her use exactly 3 times in his career. Twice before announcing major policy changes. Once before firing a senior instructor for incompetence. "Run the footage again," she said. Vex'thal complied, projecting the holographic recording into the air between them. They watched Reyna complete the course in 2.8 seconds for the 7th time that morning. Thos, a Valorian with deep purple skin and silver neural crests that ran from her forehead to the base of her spine, leaned back in her chair. Her species had evolved on a high-gravity world where slow reactions meant death from falling predators. Valorians could snatch thrown objects from the air blindfolded. Their military tradition spanned 4,000 years, and she was staring at the footage like she'd never seen combat before. "Explain to me," she said slowly, "how a species that ranks 40th percentile in measured reflex speed just broke our course record by 35%. "She changed the parameters," Vex'thal replied. "She stopped treating it as a reaction test and started treating it as a tactical problem." "I can see that, Commander. What I want to know is why none of our cadets, trained by the finest military minds in the galaxy, thought to do the same thing." Vex'thal had spent the night considering that exact question. "Because we trained them to be faster, stronger, more accurate. We assume that superior physical capabilities translate to superior combat performance." "A reasonable assumption." "Apparently not." Thos stood, moving to the windows. Outside, a group of cadets ran obstacle courses designed to test agility and endurance. They looked impressive, athletic, capable. They also looked predictable. "I received 12 messages last night," Thos said, not turning around. "From instructors, from cadets, from species representatives on the Oversight Council, all asking variations of the same question. If humans can do this, what else have we been wrong about?" "And what did you tell them?" "That I would investigate and report my findings." She turned back to face him, her neural crests flickering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep thought. "But between us, Vex'thal, I think we've made a fundamental error. We've been preparing soldiers for wars fought the way we think wars should be fought. Clean, efficient, honorable. Humans don't fight that way. No, they fight to win." Thos returned to her desk, pulling up files on her display screen. "I spent last night reading human military history. Do you know what I found?" Vex'thal waited. Chaos, brutality, innovation born from desperation. They've developed 17 different martial arts systems, 43 distinct tactical doctrines, and approximately 600 documented ambush techniques, all from fighting each other. For 3,000 years, they've done nothing but refine the art of killing other humans. She pulled up an image. Ancient human soldiers in primitive armor, carrying metal weapons. This is from Earth year 1500. Humans fighting with swords and shields. Crude, by our standards. Another image. Humans in camouflage, carrying projectile weapons. Earth year 1940. Mechanized warfare. Still crude. A third image. Human soldiers in powered armor, carrying energy weapons that looked almost modern. Earth year 2300, 2 years before first contact. 3,000 years of continuous warfare, Thoth said quietly. Never stopping, never unified, always fighting. We looked at that history and saw primitives, barbarians who couldn't evolve past their violent nature. And now? Now I'm wondering if they evolved into something we never needed to become. She closed the files. Vex'thal, I'm authorizing your proposal. Overhaul the combat training program. Use Cadet Cortez as your primary consultant. I want a full curriculum ready for review in 30 days. Vex'thal's mandibles clicked in surprise. Commandant, that's barely enough time to… I know, but word is already spreading. By tomorrow, every academy in the Galactic Defense Network will know that a human broke our course record. They'll want explanations, justifications, proof that this wasn't a fluke. Her neural crests brightened. Give me proof. Show me that human combat doctrine can be taught to other species. Show me that we've been training soldiers wrong for 90 years. And if I can't? Thoth smiled, an expression that looked predatory on a Valorian. Then we'll admit we were right about humans all along, and Cadet Cortez is simply an anomaly. But I don't think that's what you're going to find. Neither did Vex'thal. Reyna arrived at his office at precisely 0600 hours, carrying a data tablet filled with documentation. She looked tired. Vex'thal suspected she'd gotten about as much sleep as he had. Sit, Cadet. She settled into the chair across from his desk, her posture relaxed but alert. Vex'thal noticed she'd positioned herself where she could see both the door and the window. Situational awareness, automatic threat assessment, human habits. I've been authorized to restructure the Academy's combat curriculum, he said without preamble. You're going to help me. Reyna blinked. Sir, I'm just a cadet. I've been here 2 months. I don't… You invalidated 90 years of training doctrine in under 3 seconds. Don't tell me you're not qualified. Vex'thal leaned forward. Tell me about human military training. Start from the beginning. So she did. For 3 hours, Reyna explained concepts that seemed obvious to her, but revolutionary to Vex'thal. Cover and concealment, suppressive fire, asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, deception tactics. Every human conflict had generated new innovations, new approaches, new ways to gain advantages when physically outmatched. We're smaller than most species, Reyna explained. Weaker, slower in terms of pure reflex speed. So we learned to fight smarter, use terrain, create advantages, stack odds in our favor before the shooting starts. Give me an example. She pulled up footage from Earth's archives, a historical battle from 500 years ago. Human forces, outnumbered 3-1, facing an enemy with superior weapons and armor. The humans won by faking a retreat, drawing the enemy into a canyon, then triggering pre-positioned explosives that brought the walls down on top of them. That's murder, Vex'thal said, horrified. That's victory. Reyna met his eyes. Commander, I need you to understand something. Humans don't have honor codes about fair fights. We have one rule: survive, win, make the other side dead before they make you dead. Everything else is just tactics. Vex'thal thought about the Academy's combat doctrine, rules of engagement, protocols for proper weapon discharge, regulations about appropriate targeting priorities, all designed for wars between civilized species who agreed on basic principles of honorable combat. What happens when you face an enemy who doesn't follow your rules? Reyna asked softly. The question hung in the air like poison gas, because Vex'thal knew the answer. He'd seen it firsthand during the border conflicts 15 years ago, when the Academy-trained forces faced an insurgent group that used suicide tactics, hostage shields, and chemical weapons. The civilized soldiers, trained to fight honorably, had been slaughtered. The conflict ended only when command authorized extreme measures, dropped the rulebook, fought dirty, fought like humans. "Show me everything," Vex'thal said. 6 days later, Vex'thal stood in Range 7 with 20 hand-picked instructors from across the Academy. Reyna stood beside him, looking uncomfortable with the attention. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings," Vex'thal began, "thank you for coming. What you're about to see will challenge everything you believe about combat training." He activated the range, standard target course, 10 hostiles, random positions. "Instructor Zale, you hold the Academy record for your species. Please demonstrate." Zale, a mantis-like strider with reflexes that bordered on prescient, stepped into the booth. 4.6 seconds. Excellent by any standard except 1. Reyna went next. 2.9 seconds. The instructors shifted uneasily. "Now watch," Vex'thal said, playing back both runs in slow motion, side by side. Zale's technique was flawless. Perfect stance. Optimal target acquisition. Textbook accuracy. Reyna's technique looked sloppy by comparison. Her movements were less refined. Her aim points were preemptive rather than reactive. She violated half a dozen regulations about proper firing protocols. She was also 50% faster. The difference, Vex'thal explained, is not physical capability. Instructor Zale has superior reflexes by every measurable metric. The difference is philosophy. Zale was trained to react to threats. Cadet Cortez was trained to predict and prevent them. He pulled up tactical maps. Human military doctrine focuses on what they call the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Whoever completes the cycle faster wins the engagement. But humans don't try to speed up their actions. They try to slow down their enemy's observations. Reyna stepped forward, her voice steady despite addressing 24 of the galaxy's finest military minds. "We use deception, misdirection, camouflage, anything that makes the enemy waste time observing the wrong things, orienting to the wrong threats, deciding on the wrong responses. By the time they act, we've already won." That's cheating," one instructor said. "A Fenrisian with gray fur and yellow eyes." "Yes," Reyna agreed, "it is. And it works." Vex'thal spent the next hour demonstrating human tactical concepts: ambush formations, flanking maneuvers, suppression tactics, feints and false retreats. Every trick humans had developed to overcome their physical limitations. The instructors watched in growing fascination and horror. "This is barbaric," someone muttered. "This is effective," Vex'thal corrected. "And effectiveness is what we need. The galaxy is not as peaceful as we pretend. Border raids, pirate attacks, insurgent groups. We face enemies who don't follow our rules, and our soldiers die because they're trained to fight wars that don't exist anymore. He pulled up casualty reports from the last 10 years. The numbers were damning. Academy graduates performed brilliantly in simulations and poorly in actual combat situations that deviated from expected parameters. Humans survive, Vex'thal said quietly. Despite being weaker and slower, they survive. Because they train for chaos, not for perfection. They prepare for enemies who cheat, who lie, who use every dirty trick available. And then they use dirtier tricks in response. Reyna pulled up a quote on the display screen. Words from an ancient human military strategist named Sun Tzu. All warfare is based on deception. We need to learn this, Vex'thal concluded. Not to become human, but to survive the reality of modern combat. To give our soldiers tools they actually need, instead of skills that look impressive in demonstrations. Silence filled the range. Finally, Instructor Morfak spoke. She was a Valorian like Commandant Thos, with extensive combat experience. If we adopt human tactics, we abandon 1,000 years of military tradition, honor, protocol, the rules that separate soldiers from murderers. Yes, Vex'thal said simply. We do. You're asking us to become monsters. I'm asking you to let our soldiers come home alive. The two statements hung in the air, irreconcilable. Then Morfak did something unexpected. She laughed, a harsh, barking sound. I fought in the border conflicts, lost half my unit to enemies who used human-style tactics against us. Suicide bombers, ambush kills, psychological warfare. We called them dishonorable, uncivilized. She looked at Reyna. We also called them effective. My soldiers died following protocols while the enemy ignored every rule we'd ever been taught. She stepped forward, meeting Vex'thal's gaze. What do you need? Time, resources, and instructors willing to unlearn everything they know. You have me, and I suspect others will follow. Morfak glanced at Reyna. Teach us, human. Teach us how your species learned to be apex predators on a planet full of things bigger and stronger than you. Reyna's expression remained neutral, but Vex'thal saw something in her eyes. Pride, not arrogance, just quiet satisfaction at being recognized for what her species truly was. Survivors, adapters, winners. 23 days later, Vex'thal stood before Commandant Thos with a complete curriculum proposal. 600 pages of revised combat doctrine, incorporating human tactical concepts across every training discipline. Thos read it in silence, her neural crests flickering constantly. Finally, she looked up. This is radical. Yeah. It violates 36 standing protocols. Yes. It will be controversial, possibly dangerous, definitely unpopular with traditionalists. Yes, Thos smiled. I love it. Implementation begins next term. You'll have full authority to restructure the combat programs as you see fit. Expect resistance. Ignore it. She stood, moving to the windows again. Below, cadets trained in the old ways. Proper. Honorable, predictable. The galaxy is changing, Vex'thal. New threats, new enemies. We need soldiers who can adapt, who can think like predators instead of just acting like warriors. She turned back to him. Humans have given us a gift, the accumulated wisdom of 3,000 years of warfare. Let's not waste it. And Cadet Cortez? Promote her to tactical consultant. Give her teaching authority. Let her show our cadets what real combat looks like. Vex'thal's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. She'll need a staff, other humans who understand these concepts. Then recruit them. Bring in human veterans, tactical advisors, anyone who can teach our people how to fight the way humans fight. Thos returned to her desk. This academy has produced the galaxy's finest soldiers for 90 years. Starting today, we're going to produce something better. Soldiers who can win. 6 months later, Reyna stood on the observation deck watching a mixed-species squad run through a human-designed combat scenario. They moved differently now. Less textbook, more adaptive. They used cover, created crossfire angles, communicated in short, efficient bursts instead of formal protocols. They looked like human soldiers. Vex'thal joined her at the railing. "Your father would be proud." He laughed for 20 minutes when I told him the story. Then he asked if the galaxy was ready for humans to teach them war. She glanced at Vex'thal. "What did you tell Commandant Thos when she asked the same question?" "That ready or not, it was time. The old ways were getting soldiers killed. Your ways keep them alive." Below, the squad completed their objective. Clean, efficient, ruthless. "Do you ever regret it?" Reyna asked quietly. "Opening this door? Teaching aliens to fight like humans?" Vex'thal considered the question. 6 months ago, he would have said the academy trained honorable warriors. Now they trained killers. Effective, adaptable, pragmatic killers. "No," he said finally. "Because honor doesn't protect soldiers. Skill does. Adaptability does. The willingness to do what's necessary, regardless of how it looks to observers. Humans learned that lesson 3,000 years ago. The rest of us are just catching up." Reyna nodded slowly. "My instructor on Earth said something once about how humans spent millennia being the scariest thing on our planet. Because we had to be. Because everything else was bigger, faster, stronger. We survived by being meaner, smarter, more willing to do terrible things to stay alive. And now you're teaching the galaxy those same lessons." "Yeah," she smiled slightly. "Funny how that worked out." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the cadets train. Human techniques, human tactics, human ruthlessness. The galaxy was learning what humanity had always known. Survival didn't care about honor. Victory didn't reward playing fair. Combat was chaos. And the side that embraced chaos, instead of fearing it, would always have the advantage. Somewhere on Earth, Reyna's father was probably laughing at the irony. Humans, the primitive newcomers, teaching ancient species how to make war. But Vex'thal understood the truth now. Humans weren't primitive. They were experienced. 3,000 years of continuous warfare created expertise that peace-loving species couldn't match. The galaxy had been lucky humans arrived when they did, because something was coming. Vex'thal could feel it. New threats beyond the border zones, unknown enemies who wouldn't follow civilized rules of engagement. And when those enemies arrived, the galaxy would be ready. Not because they had faster soldiers or stronger warriors, but because they'd learned to fight like humans, to win at any cost, to be predators. "Come on," Vex'thal said, turning from the observation deck. "We have 16 more scenarios to review before the evaluation board arrives next week." Reyna followed, already pulling up tactical plans on her data tablet. Just another day at the academy, teaching the galaxy's finest how to survive. The human way.